Welcome to the MBUK podcast. In this series, we'll be looking back through some of the moments that helped shape the sport of mountain biking. From the pioneers that paved the way, bikes that broke the tech boundaries, and the events that pushed the very limits of the sport, to the racers who will be forever cemented in our memories for their antics on and off the track. We'll even do our best to predict how things will look in the future. If you enjoy what we're doing, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your mates. And if you have time, please give us a review. Welcome to another MBUK podcast. As ever, I'm joined by my co-host, Tom Marvin. Hi, Tom.
How's it going, Rob?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Excellent. Good chat. And we're joined by MBUK staff writer, Rach Bennet. How are you, Rach?
I'm very good, Rob. Yourself?
I'm good. Yeah, really
still
good.
good.
Thanks. Everyone keeps asking. It's so nice. Thanks, guys. Oh, no one else has asked, have they? Yeah.
Sorry, Rob.
Right, today. Now, this should be a good one, I think. So, maybe I've hyped it up too much already. Oh, well, okay, lower expectations just in case.
It's going to be all right today.
In my head, this is going to be a good one. So this is all about the racers who rang in the changes. So some of the most iconic men and women who really made a difference in the sport of mountain biking. We've got some big names on our list, absolutely colossal, in fact. So, Rach, do you want to kick us off with maybe some of the ones that stand out to you?
Yeah, sure. So for me, Missy Giove is one of the big ones for me. I'd kind of heard of her before I got into mountain biking. Yes, so she was a pretty wild character back in the 90s.
Do you remember what she used to ride with hanging around her neck?
She had a big...
piranha.
Oh, was that her little symbol?
Yeah,
like it's like dried piranha, wasn't it?
It was an actual...
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she was wild.
That's a bit weird.
I didn't know she rode with it around her neck.
I'm not sure,
I've
but...
seen her at podiums and that with
she
it.
was,
oh, no.
She's pretty wild, Kat.
Yeah.
She's pretty wild.
Yeah, she was a unique character and kind of brought mountain biking into the mainstream a bit, especially into America. She was on like chat show, mainstream TV, and just brought a whole new vibe to mountain biking for women particularly.
Yeah.
When there wasn't that many women racing at their level. I mean, she had Anne Caroline Chausson, which was racing at the same time as her.
Yeah.
Who obviously was a very good racer, won a lot.
But arguably more sort of clean cut, right?
Yeah, completely different. Like that classic mountain bike vibe of, dirt bags, racing, partying hard.
Yeah.
Being a bit out there, that's what Missy brought to the women's side.
She
of
encapsulated
racing.
that perfectly, didn't she?
Yeah. And she was really good on the bike and just gave 100% all the time, like riding with broken bits of her body and just going full on, not holding back. Yeah, so for me, she's a big player.
She was gnarly.
Yeah. And so, 11 wins, 2 overall World Cup titles.
Is that just off the top of your head, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Good work, Tom.
Big fan. Knew all about the piranha.
World champs as well in 94.
Any team managers sponsoring her probably had their work cut out, I would guess.
Yeah, but she got a lot of sponsors because of her character. I guess. Like big sponsors, like Volvo Cannondale she was on.
Yeah.
She started off in Yeti. Just they saw her at a race and was like, this girl's got something.
Yeah.
And just hooked her up that race there with the bike. And yeah, just went from there.
And then I think she was on, do you remember the global racing team?
Yeah.
That Martin Whiteley started? And she was the only one that wouldn't ride the orange. She was on a Foes, painted up, all painted white. She stayed on a Foes.
Oh, really?
The whole time, yeah. I never saw it. Maybe she rode an orange for, would it have been dual or full cross back then? Mm-hmm. But yeah, she was on a Foes for the bulk of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Despite Global being sponsored
By Orange.
Right.
Yeah.
She did things her way.
Right,
There you go. Yeah.
Stuck 2 fingers up at Halifax.
Yeah.
And,
No, thanks. I got this.
I'm
It
all
works really well.
I've got pivots.
Yeah, I got loads of pivots. She loves bearings. Okay, Tom, what about you?
Well, I think it's difficult to, as a Brit, as someone who sort of grew up with mountain biking from, the early 2000s onwards, although obviously this particular person was involved from beforehand, Steve Peake.
Ooh.
Like a massive name. Obviously, was on MBUK's team, was on Global as well.
No,
was on Orange though, wasn't he?
Yeah, so he
But not
went
Global.
Yeah, he kind of went maybe Kona when he started out. then I want to say he was on the... Did he go with Warner on that? No, I can't remember where he went. Maybe he was on MBUK after that, and then he went like full... Oh, he did a stint on Saracen with Warner when they were riding those Velici frames, so those Italian-made bikes. And then, then his MBUK, then he went full GT factory team, then Orange. Then
Syndicate, yeah. So, as someone who sort of read the mags, who, when sort of YouTube came along and videos and all that sort of stuff, like he was obviously kind of encapsulated that carefree attitude of the era that really sort of appealed to me as a 13, 14, 15-year-old, like maybe you'd look back and think, I don't know, but like it's pretty cool,
he's a cool guy.
A loud guy, big personality, but also backed up with plenty of results that really sort of cemented him as not only like one of the coolest mountain bikers, but also one of the best mountain bikers on the planet.
Without a doubt.
Not quite the GOAT because, Minar, but, up there. And even now, it's still totally relevant. He's at all the races with Syndicate, like helping run the team, helping coach the riders. So he's still involved at a really high level, and he's sort of stayed the time, remained sort of influential for 20 odd years now.
Yeah. I mean, he's won a lot of races. So I think it's 17 World Cup wins, 3 overalls. Warner was obviously the first Brit to win a World Cup, but then a couple of years after, Steve managed to win one in the US, which was really it was massive at the time. It was so competitive. There was, you could argue it's more competitive now, but when there was so much on the line, so much money back then, it was amazing to see him win. And then a bit like Gwyn, he kind of went without the rainbow stripes for so long, and then finally, after a really strong season, he went to Australia. And in 2009, managed to clinch it, just beating Minar, in fact, by a whisker.
Just by a whisker.
A whisker. It was very emotional. It was very good.
Yeah.
An amazing race to watch. Yeah.
Always loved following, always loved seeing what he did. I actually interviewed him for the BikeRadar podcast.
Did you?
Yeah. Back when the BikeRadar podcast kicked off, 2.5 years ago or something.
Yeah.
I did interview him when I went on a Santa Cruz 5010 launch.
That might be the only podcast he's on.
Really?
Yeah.
You got the scoop.
I think I'm pretty sure.
I hope we published it.
I'm pretty sure that's the only one he's on.
I'm going to triple check that we actually published it. And if we did, it'll be in the notes, in the podcast notes. Because we recorded an interview with him.
Yeah.
Great guy. He was lovely as well. Like, this is the thing, like, you get this big personality, you get this big persona, and you sort of think, maybe he's not that approachable. Maybe he's a bit, but actually, legit, super nice guy.
And that's the thing. Everyone's there because they want to ride bikes.
Yeah.
And they are, so you've always going to have that in common. And he's a genuinely lovely bloke. Really, really nice guy. Just because we've got so many to get through, I'm going to just jump to, I suppose you could call him Steve's nemesis. Nico Voulios.
Yeah.
The man who maybe the most methodical downhill racer of all time.
Kind of chalk and cheese, those two, maybe.
Yes. Steve very much that, stick any bike underneath him and he's going to make it work. Whereas Nico was very particular about his setup, worked really hard with Olivier Bossard and the Sun guys originally to really,
Because he was an engineer as well, wasn't he?
I don't know if he's got any formal training. So Fabian does have a degree in mechanical engineering and was very keen to kind of approach it like that. But I think Nico's very much just sort of learning on the job. And that guy, Jesus, 10 world championship titles, 5 overall titles. No, they called him the alien. He didn't speak a lot of English. So when he was interviewed for a lot of the mainstream media, there was very few words said. He just kind of went out there and would just, dominate the races.
Yeah.
His really calculated style, very clinical in how he approached everything. Serious amounts of testing. Like next level amounts of testing, working on everything from suspension setup to spoke tension, changing the geometry of the bike. They were plowing tons and tons of cash into it back then, so he could create the ultimate race winning bike. And as long as it lasted for a race run, that's all that mattered.
Yeah.
And then, he went down and managed to finish his career in mountain biking and move on to become a WRC driver.
Yeah.
Which is incredible. And then got back into bikes working for Lapierre.
Yeah. And also appeared on the BikeRadar podcast in an interview I did with him a few years ago.
Oh,
All the big
there's a
names.
theme.
All the big names.
There's a theme. So yeah, bit of a legend, and yeah, really nice guy as well.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Yeah, super nice guy. We've done some stuff with him in the past, haven't we? Well,
Bits
apart from
and
the
pieces.
podcast, yeah, but
You see him on like a Lapierre launch, and he's obviously so very involved in the development of those bikes.
Yes.
It's kind of like, it's not like a moonlight career. It feels like a real career for him to sort of continue on and
he's
and
so
do that.
invested in it. And you know, when he was dabbling with the EWS stuff, when it kind of kicked off, you could see it just sort of reignited that racing passion. He's so obviously unbelievably competitive.
Yeah.
I was in Gio Lapierre's office after one of the rounds of the EWS. And while we were there, Gio turned his computer around and said, look, Nico's just sent a debrief from the weekend over, just pages and pages of notes
Wow.
on the bike's performance, how the suspension operated, the tyres, all of this stuff, reams
Yeah.
and reams and reams of information, having just, you know, walked off the podium, where I'm sure many pros would just be like, right, what's next? Get training, all of this. Nico was so sort of development driven, always looking to optimize, to create any kind of possible gain.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a few of them still out there, but Nico stood out as the early adopter. You know, everyone called him the alien because he was so otherworldly when it came to his riding and his approach.
Yeah.
Now, we can't really talk about Nico without mentioning Anne-Caroline Chausson, Rach. You already did sort of allude to her earlier.
Yeah.
But she had a hell of a track record, right?
Yeah, definitely. Arguably the most successful woman mountain biker. I mean, Rachel Atherton obviously is up there as well. But yeah, winning 12 World Cup downhill champions, 5 World Cup overalls, a big player in slalom and BMX as well, winning Olympic.
2008 Olympics.
Yeah, Beijing. That can't be an easy transition either.
No. You see it a lot BMX to track because of the power
Yeah,
and, you know, smooth surfaces.
yeah. Hell of a shift.
And she seemed to be, like we said before, quite straight-laced in terms of training and pushing
Yeah.
the sport to the next level in that sense. I mean, she wanted to win, and that was her drive. And she did everything that she could to do so.
A bit like the French version of when we've talked about it a number of times, Tracy Mosley.
Yes.
Similar sort of, you know, Palmares is up there with the best, very performance orientated. And I guess if we're talking, you know, super successful French women, you know, actually I've added to this list, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
huge like influence in modern day mountain biking. She really is like
And multidisciplinary as well.
Yeah, I mean, cyclocross, cross country, you know, like seems to win anything she can turn a hand to, rides on the road as well.
Road.
A bit of everything.
But we got to go back and talk about Tracy quick, though.
We do have to go back and talk about Tracy.
Just because not only do we need to talk about how successful she was, but the other stuff she's done, which is, you know, almost just as important.
Yeah.
So bringing on the likes of Evie Richards and Hattie Harnden, to name just a couple, showing that it's really, you know, it's really good to diversify your riding, to experience and mix it up and do different types in order to make you a better rounded rider.
Yeah.
Hattie's an extremely good example who, you know, she's a rider that's started in cross country and cyclocross and, you know, bit roady, and then has now transitioned over, having dabbled with enduro.
I mean, that was just
And now
one
she's
enduro.
and now she's out, you know, getting on the podium in downhill.
Yeah. It's incredible sort of early career already.
Yeah, exactly. And similarly, you know, Evie Richards got a world champs title to her name, won World Cups, started racing on, you know, the farm with Tracy, or at least on around Malvern where Tracy is based, at a local race. And you know, Tracy took her under her wing and has helped her develop and coached her. And yeah, it's an amazing achievement.
Yeah.
What Tracy's got there.
And I think, you know, Tracy's really multifaceted. You know, we sort of came into talking about Tracy because of how successful, you know, some of, you know, Anne Cara was. And we've ended up talking about some of the races that Tracy has sort of brought under a wing from the GB perspective. But, you know, like we said in previous podcasts or other podcasts in this series, she has worked on bike development. She's sort of really pushed the sport of enduro in its early days. You know, she was one of the, you know, the founding sort of big names of enduro and sort of tackled it in a different way to many people, you know, whether she was racing on a shorter travel bike because she recognized that there were big days and she needed to stay, you know, as much as having a few extra mil of travel is going to make you faster downhill, so is feeling fresh.
Yeah.
So, you know, really sort of developed the sport of enduro as well.
Yeah, and she was one of the ones that would always carry a backpack full of kit to fix bikes, and she was always fixing other people's bikes for them. Yeah, she's brilliant. Should we wind it right back to a couple of the OGs from over in the US? John Tomac. We've got to mention John because I mean, he was one of the people, a bit like Missy for you, I think, Rach. Tomac was just cool.
Yeah.
Proper Stars and Stripes.
Americana.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, he had, my earlier memories of him was when he rode for Rally on that old, what was it like? Tie lug steel, sort of carbon Rally. And
carbon tubes, titanium lugs.
Yeah. And he had the Troy Designs paint job on his bell image helmet. Then he got the Troy Peak disc drive, Toyota disc drive.
Drop bars.
Well, that was before. That was
prior.
Before. That was on the Yeti, I think. But Tomac was cool. He was so cool. So he was a BMXer. He got into road racing, very successful at road racing, and then came across into mountain biking, where he was one of the few riders that were able to compete very successfully at world level across downhill and cross country. Which you imagine that now.
Yeah.
No, I don't think. Maybe Pidcock could give it a crack. Maybe
Wout van Aert if he actually tried at mountain biking.
Yeah.
And Pauline, true. I guess.
And
like
Pauline,
we said.
of course.
Yeah. But he was obviously a rare talent back then. But yeah, he properly, like Missy, kind of took it to the wider audience, and by doing so, he made it look cool. He was cool.
Definitely iconic. You know, if you look back at, you know, if you want to research early mountain bike or early mountain bike racing, his name and his images will pop up consistently. And his name consistently has popped up in our podcast series because he's been so influential on the way. The bikes he rode, the kit he used.
Yeah, exactly. And also he must have been one of the first riders to start having signature parts. You know, he had signature tires, saddles, all of this sort of stuff. So yeah, he clearly sort of stamped his authority and his dominance on it to a certain degree, and he went on to create his own bike brand, which was cool. And yeah, again, lovely guy.
Yeah, and a nice segue, Rob, because if we're talking about, you know, brands and people who've created their own bike brand, this is a modern sort of development of the brand, but the Athertons, multiple, because this is themselves, like, you know, they've got their own logo as like a family with their own logo. I mean, not many people have them. I don't have one.
Yet.
But yeah, I mean, the Athertons, you can't talk, you know, mountain biking dynasties or legends or family names without mentioning the most successful family of mountain bikers.
Absolutely.
So G Atherton, downhill racer, rampage, crazy man. You've got Dan Atherton, you know, builder of a bike park who sent massive lines. And of course, Rach Atherton, you can't talk about mountain bike without mentioning her. She's like the absolute legend of the sport over a very long time now.
Rach, what do you know about the Athertons? What's your first memory of those guys?
Well, Rachel, she was a big one when I started getting into mountain biking.
Yeah.
Like 2015-ish. Yeah, she was just winning everything. And like when I went to the World Cup at Fort William, when I think her and G won, 2013 maybe, when they both won. That's like my first memory of.
Oh, cool.
That's like,
they mean business.
She's a good rider.
Yeah.
she's all right.
She's got a pretty good name as well. So yeah. And also they're like the Atherton project, which I think must have been one of the early sort of
the Clay Porter
behind the scenes.
Yeah, of course.
That was
which
cool.
kind of let you know about them as people, not just racers, not just mountain bikers. Which made mountain biking look a lot of fun, for sure, in my early days of getting into the sport.
Yeah, that was an insightful sort of window into professional life as those three crazy cats.
I think my first sort of first place I came across the three of them was an MBUK. Like we talk about MBUK a lot, but it influenced a lot of people's, my riding especially influenced all that. But there's a feature in the mag about this family of mountain bikers, and there were the two brothers who were a little bit older, really good, and they had this sister called Rach, who was showing loads of promise. And I think Kelly Salone maybe gave Rach an identity frame or something like that. And there's a whole feature about the three of them. And I think Rach must have been Rach is maybe a year or two older than me. So maybe 14 or 15 or something like that. And I sort of, from there, it sort of stuck. You know how Jackson Goldstone, there's that video years ago, this little kid just like doing loads of whoops and little things, and it turns out it's Jackson Goldstone. Like that for me was my Rach after moment.
Okay.
Really cool.
I remember seeing them at, I think it was a national race down, it was not a very good track, down in Somerset, which is where they lived at the time. And I think I would have been in the same category as Dan. We were both in juniors, I guess. And G would have been youth. Rach wasn't riding. But I just remember this big dude smoked me by miles. It's like, right, who's that then?
Yeah.
And then it turned out he was smoking me and everyone else.
Yeah.
Week in, week out. Like, right, that's Dan Atherton. Right, excellent, right. And then they all moved up to North Wales to go and ride harder terrain.
Yeah.
And by 2004, G had won his first World Cup, Schladming. And there was all this sort of legend built up around their place up north, where one of our old teammates used to go and ride with G, and he said, like, you try to, it's impossible to ride the tracks they dug without just crushing your brains out. He said they were that hard, you're just hanging on for dear life. And, anytime you think you kind of had got it, you'd go back again a few weeks later, and what was sort of semi-rideable, they've gone, do you know what? We've dug this like 50-foot step down into a 90-degree corner now.
Yeah.
Try and ride that. And then everyone would just kind of ragdoll down that.
Yeah.
That's how much they were trying to push things on. And you can sort of see, people always say, it's because of her brothers that she did so well. But the reality is, Rach is an amazing rider.
Yeah.
It isn't just, I'm sure G and Dan helped in terms of they were that sort of catalyst. But, you need to give Rach the kudos she deserves, because she's an incredible rider.
Yeah. And
God, if she can ride all that stuff and the stuff in Duffy Bike Park, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Fair play.
Should we talk about where the Athertons are right now as a family? Because obviously we talked about them going back 10, 15 years, but right now they're still hyper relevant. So
oh yeah, totally.
Rach's come back. She's a mother. She came back to race down Ildsea, and kind of won. Like,
yeah.
All right, okay.
Just the 40 wins.
Yeah. Like that, that in itself, ridiculously impressive, really. Yeah. You've got G, who obviously has had a couple of big crashes, but has every time bounced back, and he's just been at Rampage, and okay, like he built a crazy line, and okay, like he's hurt himself again, but just keeps coming back for more. Yeah. But then as a brand themselves, they've got, Dan's been building Duffy Bike Park, which is, one of the UK's, like, I guess it's one of the best bike parks around, really. Like, it's for progression of what's possible on a mountain bike in the UK. And, Hardline.
Jesus. Yeah. I mean, how many people want to go and ride that?
I don't want to.
No, I don't want to.
So I'm all right, thanks. Would ride their bikes though, and that's the next part of the story, right?
Yeah.
They've got the riding, they've got the races, they've got the family, they've got the bike park. They've also got a bike brand, and a really innovative one at that. It's not,
and they've also got to be the only family that have won 3 races at the same weekend. In 2008, they won men's downhill, women's downhill, and Dan won full cross.
Yeah,
in one weekend.
Wow.
Which, I mean, is that ever going to happen again? Probably not.
Can't see it.
It's a very, very talented family.
Very talented.
It's more than me and my brother are going to do.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
More than me and my sister are going to do. She can barely ride a bike.
Right, where should we move to next? Maybe should we talk about Julie Furtado? She's a very important person from the racing world, but has kind of, a little bit like the Athertons, post-racing, moved on and kind of done her own thing. Who wants to kick off about that then?
Yeah, I'll go for it. Yeah.
Go for
Another strong woman to get me talking about. So she, started off skier, just a general outdoor, gnarly, fast woman. Mm-hmm. And then onto bikes. And she was racing world champs, multiple world champ winner, World Cup overalls. And then I guess after that, she was just passionate about bikes and led her into designing women specifically. I don't know if she found that she didn't have products that suited her, which led her into the designing of bikes. And Santa Cruz, well, Juliana, as we all know, is the Santa Cruz offshoot for the women's specific, and that's named after her. And not just bikes, like products as well. I guess clothing, saddles, and that sort of wider aspect of mountain biking.
I guess it's always been a very male-dominated arena in terms of bike design and stuff like that. And I suppose maybe she could just see the benefit of doing stuff properly for women and the benefits that would bring. And thankfully, Santa Cruz were smart enough to pick up on that and roll with it. And now we've got one of the coolest brands out there, regardless of whether it's for men and women. It's a seriously the
and one of
Juliana
the only,
brand is cool.
I mean, you've got Liv as well. Yeah. And other brands have dabbled in it, but a specific line for women. It's, her and, well, Juliana and Liv, I guess, are the two. Yeah. The two that are still standing.
Yeah. What was with the best colours as well, and was really bitter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. They do it well. They do it well.
She's also a big advocate of speaking out about mental health, like talking about her struggles.
Okay.
And like getting people saying it's all right to talk about it, and it's good because racing, really, especially for races, it can be quite a mental battle, I guess. There's a lot of pressure. Yeah. And also afterwards. Like, what do you do when you've been a professional, just athletes in general? Yeah. A professional athlete's life is I can imagine it's very lonely at times.
Very hard.
Very hard when you stop.
Yeah.
I know Steve Peat mentioned that when he stopped racing. He was like, no, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, right.
That's all you've done all your life.
Is your identity, I guess.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to move on from that.
Okay, well, we've talked a lot about Northern Hemisphere riders, because there's a lot of us. But shall we flip hemispheres and talk about one of the most... I mean, I've oversaid the word iconic. So I've said that word so many times, but I'm trying to think... I need a thesaurus for another word for iconic. But we can't think of any between us right now. Rob's shaking his head. Really Rach is looking at me blankly. Really cool.
I've said that too much.
You said that too much.
Steezy rider.
Well, Steezy maybe, but Sam Hill.
Oh man,
like
he's got to be Steezy. Foot out, flat pedals.
Foot out, the original Steezy.
Yeah, there we go. So Sam Hill, someone who, is Aussie from down under. Maybe not the world's most visible sort of continent to come from, but made a massive splash in the world of downhill with some incredible runs that we've talked about in other episodes of this podcast, like, oh, damn it, I need to say iconic again. Just incredible moments from mountain biking, who then transferred over to the new world of enduro and once again, quite literally stamped his stealth-clad feet into that world as well.
Nice. I like that.
I just made that up on the spot.
5'10", I love that.
Yeah.
They love that as a soundbite. Please make sure you address your check to Tom Marvin.
Yeah. But yeah, Sam Hill.
Sam Hill. He really started to... I suppose, coming to the limelight around sort of 2003 when he was riding for Intense. I'm not sure if it was that same year he won a junior world champs title. And then not long after that, he signed up and was part of, maybe it was before then he was on Intense. Yeah, maybe it was before then because he was on the Iron Horse Mad Cats team with Nathan Rennie, and Rennie won the World Cup overall in 2003. So yes, it was before that he was on Intense. And then... riding with Bryn Atkinson, Nathan Rennie and him doing, it's hard for Aussies, right? They have to basically pack up and ship off for 6 months of the year to be largely in Europe or North America. And that was when the Norba race series was huge in America. So spent a lot of time in the US. And, Sam was, and still is, very quiet, softly spoken, doesn't say a whole lot. Mm-hmm. But then on a bike is an absolute monster.
Yeah.
Just... he's known best for probably the way in which he approaches racing. Mm-hmm. I remember being in Fort William on the chairlift going up, and you'd see him just, everyone else charging, riding as hard as they could. And Sam would be sort of going a bit steadier, pulling over, having a little look, taking his time, very, very much, sort of a steady sort of approach, very thoughtful. And then he would pull out lines that no one else had seen. And I mean, he, even when you get to see some of his stuff in enduro, he'd be doing exactly that.
Yeah.
Drifting insides and doing different things that no one else maybe thought was possible, or just thought there's no way I can carry enough speed, so I won't do it. But then Hill would come through on his flat pedals, like Rach said, and just hang a foot out and destroy a turn.
Yeah.
And get people just baffled as to how on earth he was doing any of it. And, he won tons of stuff. And in the downhill races, some of the hardest downhill tracks, he would win by nearly 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Which is unheard of. But also he's so mentally strong. As soon as he sort of sets his mind to something, it was hard to sort of shake him. You'd hear all these things about him during practice where he's kind of just made his mind up that he's going to go and win, and then he kind of follows through and does it. We were in Pila. There was the World Cup there in 2005. Luke was racing, Luke Marshall, who we work with, and Sam was coming back from a broken elbow, so a pretty nasty injury, and I think people had sort of written him off because the track was gnarly. The track was really tough. Smoked everyone. And 8 weeks off the bike, and he just come back and just absolutely annihilated the competition. And it was that, and he did similar in 2010 in Mount St. Anne. Came back having not won a whole lot, had knee surgery and wasn't really riding, and then came back and won another world champs. Absolutely incredible rider, and just an absolute killer on a bike.
And he's still someone who has, holds huge sway in mountain biking at the moment. He's been around 20 years or so. He came back and he did a spotted downhill this year, and might not have sort of set the world alight in terms of results, but
set social media alight.
Set social media alight, and everyone was talking about him. You've got we sort of chatted in another podcast about how he's got his shoes. He was one of the first to he's got the shoes that have got his name, and it's got knee pads. He's really, despite maybe not being the most out there character in some respects, he's certainly made a name for himself in multiple ways. So really made a success of being a mountain biker.
Absolutely. And it was just always amazing to see how quick he could turn his hand to a new track. Didn't matter what the venue was, where people would say, well, you can't do well because you're on flat pedals. Like Rotorua in 2006, there was a huge sprint, and he still goes out and wins.
Yeah.
You've not got him on the BikeRadar podcast.
No, he's not been interviewed on the BikeRadar podcast. No, not yet.
One to tick off.
I think I'm going to jump in here with an XC because I'm quite into my XC at the moment. Thomas Frischnick. A bit of a pioneer, I guess, in the XC world. I mean, he was pretty successful back in his day, and he's one of the first Europeans to head over to the States and do pretty well over there on the scene. Before mountain biking was really super big in Europe. I mean, they had the road, which was a big thing over here, and he started off in cyclocross. But went over there. He's an Olympic silver medalist. Didn't quite get the gold, but can't have everything.
No.
Maybe he's your big comeback. Paris 2024.
And got world champs retrospectively, because that was back in the day when XC was kind of just become an Olympic sport. And with that, the whole, I guess, cycling and performance enhancing drugs was quite big. So he got silver to someone who then later admitted 4 years later, I think, potentially admitted he was on the gear. So he never got to wear his rainbow stripes, which
that's a shame, isn't
in XC. But he did get 2 world champs in XCM marathon.
Okay.
So I guess that made up for it a little bit.
Yeah.
And he's a massive part of the Scott SRAM team. He runs the show, right?
Like super influential in the success of Nino Schurter, who is the most successful male XC rider, I think, ever.
Yeah.
With numerous
many wins. Yeah,
and
numerous.
just took the overall again at the age of 37, which is pretty impressive.
I mean, maybe that's a name that we definitely did put on our planning sheet to talk about.
Sure.
Nino. You can't talk about cross-country mountain biking without mentioning Nino. Like we say Minar's the GOAT of downhill, Nino's the GOAT of XC, right? He's won everything going. Yeah. Not only does he win, XC Olympic, he's also popping off down to South Africa and
win the Cape
Epic, which is a completely different sport almost, and he'll send like a cool little Euro table as he does it.
And how many world titles has that guy won now?
Oh, I don't know.
I think it's 10.
10?
Yeah.
Which is madness.
To train at that level for that long.
Hard work.
And with the way the sport's going, you've got likes of Tom Pidcock and Matthias Flukiger and all these, I guess, slightly younger.
Almost
and he's
half
still,
his age.
he's
Bloody
still
youth.
killing it on the world circuit.
What a dude. Speaking of slightly older gentlemen,
All right.
we probably need to mention Sean Palmer.
Okay.
His ride in 96, the Cairns World Champs. I remember I had the post, I cut the page out of the magazine and stuck it at my wall.
Well,
It was, he was one of the first guys out there to not wear a skin suit, which was kind of refreshing at the time. Not that wearing a skin suit was a terrible thing, but it was just different. It was just different to see someone in a pair of Vans and Fox motocross baggy clothing, and he obviously left the peak on his helmet, which was kind of nice. No one likes a bullet head. So that was really cool to see. And then, his outspoken sort of party hard, race hard, ride hard attitude spilled over and kind of really cemented his name in the sport. And what I think some people sort of forget is that he only ever won one World Cup. He never got a world champs title, anything like that, but just one World Cup in 99 in Big Bear, which he was actually wearing a skin suit for. But, he was like falling out with his sponsors, and he would, I remember I think he had a falling out with Fox, who was sponsoring for clothing at the time. He just wore jeans with Specialized written down the side at one four-cross race down in Plymouth, which was pretty cool. Yeah, I think his influence on the sport and how it changed just the look of things is definitely worth including him in this list. And if off the back of that, not necessarily directly related, but we've spoken about Aaron Gwynn as well, but generally his just sort of consistency and professionalism upped things even more. And we've spoken in other podcasts about how riders go out and make money. Gwynn signing with YT as a frame only and then bringing in all these other endorsements from elsewhere made him a serious amount of cash. And it also sort of opened other riders' eyes as to there's more to it than just signing for a bike brand, and that's kind of everything. So he definitely deserves a mention.
Yeah.
And maybe before we wrap up, you wanted to mention one more person, Tom.
I don't think we can talk about, famous or I guess riders who have cemented their place. I don't really know how to sort of put it really, but you can't really talk about mountain biking and sort of our heroes of the sport without sort of talking about Stevie Smith.
Yeah.
Who, was a massive name in mountain biking and downhill racing, one of the most popular guys on the circuit, popular with both the people who are racing, but also with the fans, who sort of sadly passed away and is still, really remembered across the paddock, across mountain biking as a whole, as sort of, one of the good guys.
And pushed Canadian downhill. Really showed what was possible, I think. Obviously they had a big scene anyway, but maybe hadn't necessarily cut it at the pointy end in terms of the racing consistently anyway. And his battle with G. Atherton for that overall series has to go down in history as one of the most exciting seasons, all the way down to the line. When the pressure was really on, he seemed to properly rise to it.
Yeah, you've got Finn and Jackson that sort of dedicate their wins to him now, because they were like, I guess, up and coming when he was at the height, and a Canadian for them to look up to.
Yeah, same as Mark Wallace and Miranda Miller. They always cite Stevie as an inspiration and someone that's helped in their careers.
Yeah.
So sadly he's no longer with us, but obviously his legacy lives on.
Yeah. You can't sort of talk about MSA without talking about him. The Stevie Smith drop.
Yeah.
Finn's win last year. Like, I'm not much of an emotional man, but
yeah, totally. And then
there was onions being cut in the room.
Yeah, then Jackson's this year.
Yeah, and Jackson's this year.
Oh my gosh, yes. Brilliant. Well, thank you guys. And on that note, we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much for listening. As ever, please stay tuned for future MBUK podcasts. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.